Welcome to this episode of Adam Answers. Some of you may be surprised by who asked the next question. I've been putting this one off for ages, but Elliott Connie asked me a question that I figured I might as well get to soon. So he asks, what made you choose to practice solution-focused brief therapy, and how has it benefited you as a mental health professional? So I'm going to attack both of those things, but one right after the other. So what made me practice solution-focused brief therapy actually started when I was an undergraduate student, and I didn't even know about solution-focused brief therapy, but I worked at an inpatient mental health facility with children between the ages of 6 and 10. And each week we would work with them on what I now understand was a CBT perspective. And we would work with them each week on a point system. And if they did what they were supposed to do, if they behaved the way they were supposed to, then they would earn enough points that on the weekend, they could go home and spend time with their families. And one of the things that I noticed after I had done this for a few weeks is that I realized that they would go home on the weekend and they would come back, and it was like we were starting over. Their behavior had gone back to where it was when we started, and we were kind of putting pieces back together. And I quickly realized that if we wanted them to change and we wanted that change to last, we actually needed to work with the entire system, with their family. And so that's what prompted me to go on and get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And the reason that I did that is because I wanted to work with the systems as a whole. Well, then as I went into working with families and family systems, one of the things that I realized is that we could spend a lot of time talking about how families got to the particular place that they got to, but that didn't actually help us to produce any change. In some sense, I started to recognize the same things that I had noticed when we were working with these kids individually, that if we spent time just talking about the problem, then the problem just persisted. We never actually made any movement. So one of the things as part of my master's program is that I got introduced to solution-focused brief therapy. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that it transitioned us to saying, despite how you got here, where would you like to go? What would you like to be different? And I started to realize that this concept of thinking about where you wanted to go was something that was prevalent in lots of different industries, right? If you went to an architect, they would say, tell me what you want your final product to look like. My wife is a seamstress who makes wedding dresses. And she doesn't start with, what's the worst dress you've ever worn and how do you know it didn't fit? She says, please tell me in as much detail as you can about the dress that you would like to have. And then they work toward that perspective. So I realized that in most industries, this is the perspective. If you go to a personal trainer, they start telling you about, they start asking you about like, what would you like to achieve? What are your goals for coming here? So I realized that if we started moving in this direction, that's actually what would help us create change. So I just started experimenting with that. And that's when I started to see people move and move fairly quickly to the kinds of families they wanted to be. So I think that's really what drives me, is that if we're here to help people, if we're here to help people change, solution-focused brief therapy gives a really immediate way of doing that. I think I might throw in here as well, what keeps me doing solution-focused brief therapy is that since then I've turned into a researcher. And I've researched lots of aspects of solution-focused brief therapy. And one of the things that I think is most compelling about why we should be solution-focused brief therapists is because the impact it has on the way people feel, and also the impact on the way people think. Their brains start to change, their emotions start to change, and people feel good about this process of change. And I think one of the things that's really, really beneficial is that if people can feel good as they're changing, they're more likely to keep that change going. So I think that's what keeps me going as a solution-focused brief therapist, is that knowing that, that people can feel good throughout this change process, that's really worthwhile. Now, I think the other part of the question was, what impact does that have on me as a mental health professional? I think one of the major impacts that it has on me as a mental health professional is that it helps me to enjoy my work. This work can now be fun and enjoyable because just like those families who are changing and growing and learning, I get to experience them going through that change and seeing that effect, that positive effect that it has on them. And that's fun. That's an enjoyable experience. I think the other thing that it's done for me as a mental health professional, and this is what has been confirmed not just for me, but for other people in research, is that it causes less burnout. I don't feel like I need to take a break from this kind of work, and I don't feel like I need to go get another job. But I think the final thing that I would say that it's done for me as a mental health professional is that it has changed the way that I live my life. It helps me to, in moments of challenge or difficulty or struggle, it helps me to listen and apply these things to myself and say, so if I were to walk through this in a way that would be just right, or if I came out on the other end of this, what would my desired outcome be? And I think that helps me to traverse life that can be difficult in a really meaningful way. So I think there's lots of reasons that I do this. There's lots of reasons that I keep doing this. And there's lots of reasons that it helps me as a mental health professional. But I think the final thing I want to say is, I think it's just a good way to live life. When we look at where we want to be, when we look at the strengths and qualities that we have that will help us get there, it just orients our life in a really positive way. So I hope that's helpful. I hope that answers the question. And let me know what you think in the comments below.